Welcome to The Watcher. I'm your cult leader, Tom Pot, and I just watched the finale of Loki, and that was the sound of my head exploding, if you're in the audio version. But either version, whether you're on audio or video, please give this a like and subscribe and all that good stuff, because of course, I had to figure out what was going on here and do a bit of research to do all this. And of course, I'm doing that for a lot of stuff. I just put up my Black Widow review, if you want to check that out. That was out on Friday. And I'm going to be doing this for all the Marvel Disney shows. The Emmy-nominated Marvel plus Disney shows, I'll have you know. Thank you very much. Because the Emmy nominations dropped yesterday. And Don Cheadle got an Emmy nomination for watching Anthony Mackie act, as far as I can tell. At least he was like, I'm as confused as you. So, yeah. But interesting stuff, I guess. And I should also say, I called it the finale. That is technically the season finale, not the series finale, as opposed to all the other Marvel shows that have been series finale seemingly. This one, as we learned in the mid-credit scene, Loki will return in season 2. This is something that was rumored for a long time. I think this is the first time it's been confirmed. I've been saying that it looked like it was going to be a second season the whole time, because I'm pretty sure that was what the report was. And here we finally have confirmation. And that's kind of interesting. For a few reasons, but I will say right up top, if you've never watched any of these videos, the way I do it is I give my brief thoughts on the episode up top, do a recap, and then get into Easter eggs and all that kind of stuff. Here I'm going to have to get into what this means for the MCU, talk a little bit more about the Kang character, and much, much more. So feel free to jump around in the video if you need to. My thoughts on this episode, right? A lot of people have been kind of down on Loki overall, the show. I'm not one of those people. I've actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But I do understand the criticism, people saying it's slow and doesn't necessarily feel like it's going to have a major impact, although I think that definitely changed here. I don't think this episode is going to really change anyone's opinion in that case. It was a very slow, talk-heavy episode that was very geared towards comic-heavy readers. I think if you just watch the MCU, it might still be a little bit baffling. More so than any of the other Disney Plus shows so far. I mean, I kind of made a joke, it's a running joke at this stage, that the Disney Plus shows, and a lot of the Marvel shows, even when they were on Netflix, it was like, last episode, it was like, okay, get on your costume and beat up the bad guy. This was the antithesis of that. This was like, it was like watching actors on a stage, really. And that's, going to not necessarily get people entertained. And I think because of that, it wasn't a good finale, because it didn't feel like it offered a sense of conclusion. And again, the fact that it's getting a season 2 means that you don't necessarily need that, but I also feel like it could leave people a bit unsatisfied. And I kind of would understand that. I don't think was it a great finale? Not necessarily. I thought it was very interesting. I'm excited for the possibilities in the future. But again, as a self-contained episode and finale to a season, I don't think it necessarily felt like it addressed or answered a lot of the questions we sort of had in some ways. And I don't think it necessarily was a very satisfying ending to the first season of Loki. But again, considering we're getting a second season, it's hard to kind of judge that yet. And of course, the impact of the rest of the ones on the MCU, like this is going to have a major impact going forward. And I think, a lot of Disney Plus shows, I don't know necessarily could you say that it was going to have an impact on certain characters, certainly. But again, obviously we haven't seen those characters since their shows ended. But this is going to have an impact on the MCU as a whole. Like, this was basically the prelude to Phase 4, I would say. At least that's what it felt like. And that's my theory, Tom's theory, here. And that's certainly how it feels like. And I will get into that a bit more in the ending. But as for what actually happened in the episode, the episode starts, this citadel, as we know it now, it wasn't a castle in the sky, it was a citadel apparently. This timeline is kind of going around it. And that's sort of basically like what the TVA have on their monitors, where we have the timeline that's a straight line. It's basically running around the castle here as well. And we kind of hear echoes of all the MCU timeline and all that kind of stuff. Throughout history, I think there was like some classical music as well, so it was basically like all time is sort of happening concurrently, basically. And from there, we get our two characters into the Citadel. We have our Sylvie and Loki, of course, from last week. were about to go in there, and here they are. There was something I was kind of wondering in the kind of previously on Loki. They had like a thing like, you weren't born to be king. And I was like, oh God, is he going to become the head of the TVA? Like, I was worried that they might have spoiled that there, but that was not the case. It was also, I want to say this episode was actually very short for a finale. I think it might have been like, certainly one of the shortest episodes of the series. I think the Lamentis one was kind of short. Maybe this is the short. It was definitely shorter than I expected it to be. But as they're in the Citadel, Miss Minutes appears. This strange character, Miss Minutes, who knows more than we expect and is seemingly a lot more aware of things going on than you would expect from her, happy avatar. But she's basically kind of being like, this is where he who remains lives. And he's like, you can stop now and he'll return you to a timeline. Loki is offered a time where he can defeat the Avengers, kill Thanos, get the Infinity Gauntlet, and rule Asgard. Sylvie is told she can have a life of happy memories and basically be on the same timeline as Loki. In other words, they can be together. And it kind of feels like that's what Loki actually wanted as well. But they're kind of like, no dice. They ignore Miss Minutes basically. And Miss Minutes then appears at the TVA to Ravonna Renslayer. And of course, last time, Ravonna had asked Miss Minutes to give her files on the creation of the TVA, who made the TVA, all this stuff. And then she shows up and it's like, how are those files going? And she's like, oh yeah, here they go, I'm still working on them. And Ravonna looks at the file and she's like, this isn't what I asked for. And Miss Minutes is like, well, I think this will be useful for you. And Miss Minutes is, I guess, the right-hand man of, I guess, this character who we should now call He Who Remains. And again, calling it, I'm not sure, like, I don't know if we can call him Kang or not, because there's a lot of questions to be asked about that yet. I will say it's Jonathan Majors. I think it's good. Like, I did talk about last week how it was going to be tricky for them to deal with that reveal, because obviously we all expected this character to show up, and of course the character did show up. But the other question is, you don't really want to reveal Kang in all his glory in the finale of a show that some people might not watch. Some people might just be going for the movies. And I was like, well, if you don't give them a reveal at all, if it's just like, oh, damn, we just missed Kang, they're not going to be satisfied. But here, I think they found a really good way of doing that and a really good balance. But again, I do think some people might be a little bit underwhelmed by the finale all the same. But yeah, Miss Minutes seems to be kind of working at the behest of Kang, certainly, and is very aware of what's going on. Ravonna, seemingly not as aware as it seems, starting off, as we get to a bit later on. So, when this is all happening, we get to reveal Jonathan Majors, who is... He's not blue like Kang. Again, sometimes that's a mask. So, he is wearing purple, which Kang does. They're referred to him as He Who Remains. He doesn't get named in this at all. Again, we're going to talk about that at the end of this kind of recap. But the purple thing he's wearing does look a little bit like his costume, especially when you see it from the back. It's kind of got I don't know what you call that. It's like a rim, for lack of a better word, around it. And, he's very nonchalantly eating an apple like bad guys do. Although whether or not this guy's really fully bad, that kind of becomes up for debate later on. Immediately, Sylvie tries to kill him in the elevator, and he easily manages to avoid all that, and basically is now outside the elevator waiting for them as they come up. How we can do that, there's an answer to that coming up. So, Mobius, back at the TVA, now confronts Ravonna Renslayer, and she's like, hey, I'm just going to get security in here. And they're like, you're going to have a problem with that. Now, here's something interesting. I think I pointed out, I can't remember what episode it was, but there was a pencil where they very noticeably focus on the name of the school. I think it was like Benjamin Franklin School. It was something really cliched. It was cliched enough where looking it up really did no results. But that turned out to be a bit of foreshadowing, because, as we see, B-15 is now free. She's in Ohio in 2018, being chased by Minutemen. And as the Minutemen are going to arrest her, in walks Ravonna Renslayer. But it's not Ravonna Renslayer. It's a teacher that looks like Ravonna Renslayer, to the confusion of the Minutemen. But that obviously proves, hey, these people in the TVA are variants, including Ravonna Renslayer. She had a life before the TVA, everyone in TVA is variants, blah, blah, blah. basically the TVA is bogus, dude. And that's sort of what we see there, okay? Kang goes on and on about predetermination for a long time. That's been a kind of a recurring theme. Here, you know, everything you do is planned out, blah, blah, blah. Ravonna... Actually, I'll finish off the Ravonna story first. Before I go back to the Citadel, because that's where the bulk of the episode takes place after. But Ravonna basically says, like, the TVA is a lie, but what if it's a necessary one? Again, this is actually kind of in keeping with what Kang is saying later on. So, again, Ravonna is often a love interest of Kang in the comics, kind of possibly putting the seeds for that here, if that does play out later on. But Mobius goes to try prune her, she overpowers him, does not prune Mobius, but basically goes through a portal, and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to look for free will. And that's presumably based on documentation he was given by Miss Minutes. And that's pretty much the end of the story in the TVA until the very end. And then we go back to Kang. As I said, he's talking a lot about predetermination. The reason he's able to do all this is because he has a transcript of everything that's going to happen. So he knows when they're going to try to attack him, and he can easily avoid it as a result. And he drops the fact that he, you know, over many different times he's been a ruler, a conqueror, Kang the Conqueror, get it? But he says a variant of himself lived in the 31st century. In the first episode we saw a weapon from the 31st century. You know, presumably a variant of Kang, or a variant of he who remains. Like there's a lot of other variants, but basically they say there's other versions of Kang that basically make contact with each other and were cordial, and they tried to improve multiple universes. That they kind of realized that the universe was stacked on top of each other. That was the discovery of this character. However, other versions were not so peaceful. Variants of He Who Remains, because they don't give him his actual name either, which is what we'll get to in a minute. They start fighting to destroy other realities. The first one variant encounters a creature, a Lyeth, who was created when all these kind of worlds were chaotic and the multiversal war ensued. And he managed to study and basically control a Lyeth to a certain degree, so that he can bring an end to the multiversal war. So this Kang that we're seeing, He Who Remains, is basically the one who stopped the multiversal war and got one consistent universe. And he created the TVA and everything that goes along with that. He's keeping order, as it were. So as much as he's billed as a bad guy, he's keeping the wolves from the door, as it were. He's making one timeline, because the alternative is that you're going to have a lot of different variants of Kang, one of which is going to be Kang the Conqueror, who want to take over the multiverses and many universes and etc. Okay, so it's a fascinating idea, and it's something that we'll get to later on. But this is basically how they managed to have Kang and not Kang in the finale at the same time. Like, it's the character, but it's not the most evil version of the character. Even though obviously this guy has done a lot of killing and all sorts of other stuff to get to this point. But yeah, he's basically the one version in this, and there's multiple other versions, and there will be certainly after the result of the end of the episode. So he basically says the line, and I think this is actually word for word. He says, "If you think I'm evil, wait till you meet my variants." Okay, again, sums the whole thing up. He offers to let Sylvie and Loki run things. If you kill me, it will start a multiversal war, etc. Or, you know, you can run things. Basically, he's like, I'm old, I'm tired. So those are kind of like the two options, and it's one that kind of drives conflict between them. And he says something very interesting then. He says, we just crossed the threshold. In other words, he no longer knows what's going to happen. This is how the future is going to unfold with either of these two decisions. And we also see that the timeline around the castle is starting to slowly branch. So the idea being, you guys can run the TVA and get this timeline back to normal, or if one of you chooses to kill me, the timeline's going to go all over the place, and there's going to be all different variants of me. And yeah, it comes down to that decision. They're either going to rule time, or they're going to destroy Kang, and time will be all over the place. And we sort of also have Kang being sort of inevitable, like Thanos, in a certain way, because he's like, if you kill me, eventually time is going to circle around to the fact that I'm back here. Okay, all these variants are going to be around here again. And eventually one of them is going to be up on top and come up with the idea I came up with and is going to be sitting in the Citadel. Or you can take charge now. Sylvie and Loki fight over this. They're not sure what to do. Sylvie's basically like, this is my journey, I came to kill him. Yada, yada, yada. Loki insists that killing Kang could bring about something much, much worse. But of course, she thinks that Kang is lying. And Loki's only saying this because he wants the throne. They continue to fight the sword fights magic. They both have the opportunity to kill each other as well and refuse to do it. Loki says he doesn't want the throne. He only wants Sylvie to be okay. Okay? It's interesting because this is kind of shows the journey Loki has been on. He's much more vulnerable. It's the first time he's ever been kind of open with other people and emotional. Because he's like, I don't want to hurt you. I just want you to be okay. And they kiss. And the one time he was emotional, it hurts him. Because she opens up a portal behind him, pushes him through, and seals it behind him, leaving her in the room with this version of Kang, who she quickly kills. He plunges a knife into him, and he dies. And as he does that, Kang says, "See you soon." And Sylvie kind of sits around wondering if she made the right call. She doesn't feel entirely whole. I think there was an interview with Sophie DiMartino for Marvel.com where she was basically like, she's not satisfied with having killed him. She just still feels empty. And because of that, the timeline starts running amok as we see outside the windows of the castle. The timeline's branching all over the place. It's splintering everywhere. The TVA is now looking at the monitor, seeing the timeline in total disarray. And M15 and Mobius are sort of undeterred. They're like, is this what he wants us to do? There's no way we can control this or stop this. And they say, for all time, always, which of course is slogan of TVA, but also the name of the episode. But that's not where we leave it. So as much as Mobius and B-15 are looking at this all happen, Loki was pushed through the portal. He's back in the TVA building, very kind of sorrowful, of course, because he's been sort of the first time he finally opened up to someone, essentially, and it bit him on the ass. And he's sitting there sorrowful? That's not a word. Sorrowful and mournful. And then he gets up and the TVA is in chaos. Minutemen are running all over the place. It seems like everyone's kind of confused, and he sees Mobius and B-15 discussing what to do and runs up to them and he's like, hey, we have to warn you, there's this man who knows everything that's going to happen, this omnipotent man basically. He planned this all out and he's set for war. We need to prepare, he is coming. But they don't recognize him. They look at him as in like, who are you? You're the analyst? Okay. They freak out because he's being erratic, and they call security. And our last shot, they give us the kind of Planet of the Apes sort of shot where it's a statue that gives us a big reveal. Where normally the Timekeeper statues lay for the whole series, now a statue lies of Kang the Conqueror. Dun dun dun. And that's how we end, of course. Again, there's no reason to discuss the mid-credit scene. It's just saying that Loki is going to be back for a second season. But it's very interesting. So I want to go first into that reveal. The production designer on Marvel.com basically wrote it out, just kind of confirming that the statue is not of another variant of this person. It is Kang the Conqueror. So she says, Loki looks at the Timekeeper statue area and finds the statues are no longer there. In its place is a single statue with the face of the man he just met at the end of time in a futuristic suit. The variant, he who remains, warned them about Kang. So in other words, we're ready for war. That's what that ending means. As for the TVA, these are obviously now different versions of the character. There's some characters where it's not entirely clear, are they going to be affected by timelines? This is presumably a different timeline that Loki has found himself in. How is that the case? Not entirely clear. Why can Loki remember? It seems like some characters are not affected by different timeline changes. Potentially. Sylvie, Loki, Ravonna. He's still aware of what happened before. Does that entirely make sense? I don't know. Again, I feel like some of these things you could probably pull a thread and the thing would unravel a little bit. But it's an interesting ending nonetheless. As for the TVA now being a bit more villainous, in the comics there's Timekeepers and there's what they call Time Twisters, who are sort of like the evil counterparts. The Timekeepers were sort of benevolent. Time Twisters were malevolent. They're trying to do it for their own good, basically. And I kind of feel like that's the sort of direction we're going in. That there's going to be time twisters. Maybe the TVA are going to be a lot more villainous and out villainous in the second season. Who knows? Maybe it's just whoever is pulling the strings now that there is a multiverse. It's honestly, you could blow your brain trying to figure all this stuff out, as I did, and I've just now pieced it back together. Another thing that's interesting here, the Sacred Timeline is now basically broken. This is, a lot of people speculated that it was with Wanda. A lot of people wondered about in the second episode of Loki. This is the multiverse. The timeline is officially broken. There is multiple different timelines. They're all branching constantly. And what that means, it means a lot of stuff. But the most obvious connection is going to be Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. He's presumably going to have to try to fix this or make it somewhat consistent. But really it seems now like we had the Infinity War saga. This is going to be the Multiverse saga, I guess. This could, like, what we have here could be the start of the next 10 years of Marvel stuff. So, you know, the most obvious ramification is going to be Doctor Strange. But this could have ramifications for years to come. Of course, the other one that we should really point out is Spider-Man No Way Home. How are you able to have all these different versions of Spider-Man? This is how. Is this why we haven't had a trailer for Spider-Man yet? Who's to say? Potentially, though. The thing is, it now totally makes sense why you can have all these different Spider-Man characters in one timeline. What it means for Doctor Strange, trying to, you know, I guess, fix things a little bit, but I imagine he's going to fail for quite a while. Doctor Strange is out in March next year. We're obviously not going to get the next season of Loki by then. So I don't think you can fix everything. But then again, time is all over the shop. So who knows what's going to happen. I will say what is interesting is that I think there was just a report from the Hollywood Reporter who mentioned as an aside, it's expected that Tom Hiddleston is going to return as Loki for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now again, that could be a variant of Loki. It could be this Loki, who is in the TVA, who knows that Kang is coming, that a war is coming. How does Loki figure into the future of the MCU? At some point, we imagine Kang the Conqueror is going to be the next big bad, the next Thanos of the Marvel Universe. He could be trying to warn the Avengers that they're coming, because he might realize that it's their kind of Earth's only hope. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit is this character of Kang, who we keep referring to as Kang, because it's hard to know what to call him. Jonathan Majors, obviously, is the actor playing him. He was just in Lovecraft Country. I think he actually got some nominations for Lovecraft Country at the Emmys as well. Fantastic actor. I recommend Last Black Man in San Francisco. He's fantastic in that. And I think he's an actor that you can pop in and out of these different, you know, TV series and movies. Of course, we're told that Kang, the Conqueror, is going to be in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Here he's playing a version of a character called He Who Remains, the last variant who managed to get the timeline into one sacred timeline. There is a He Who Remains in the comics, but I don't think anyone knows who he is. Again, kind of retroactively, I suppose, saying that it's Kang. Not necessarily in the comics world, but at least in the MCU. He's a version of Kang. And the reason I'm hesitant to call him Kang is because the character is called Nathaniel Richards, okay? Now, again, they haven't named him yet here, probably because they are kind of waiting for a big reveal later on. Nathaniel Richards is what Kang is basically in the comics. He's, again, the same origin, 31st century scientist, discovers all these things. He has loads of different variants in the comics, okay? There's also, obviously, if you hear this and you don't know much about the character, you're probably thinking, Richards, oh, like Reed Richards in the Fantastic Four. That's also not entirely always clear. He thinks he's an ancestor of Reed Richards. I don't think it's confirmed ever, but he could be. Certainly there is a lot of ties to Kang the Conqueror and Fantastic Four, so that's another real benefit for Marvel getting the Fantastic Four rights under the one umbrella now. But, I mean, he has all sorts of different variants. I mean, I have a few down here. He had Rama-Tut, who was a kind of ancient Egyptian pharaoh, I believe. We have Scarlet Centurion, which is basically another version of Doctor Doom, sort of. We had Iron Lad. At one stage, he was that character. And there's one that I want to talk about called Immortus. Because this character is probably very close to Immortus. At least even the way he's dressed, he kind of had similar clothing, aside from, I think, Immortus has like a big kind of crowny thing on his head. But that was a character that did kind of maintain a timeline. I think he was generally not an out-and-out villain. He was a bit more good. Again, trying to untangle all this stuff is very, very tricky. Even trickier than the job this Immortus character had. But yeah, it's very much like that. And I found there's a very interesting quote that I'm not going to say I dug out anywhere. I actually found it on the Marvel Wikis. And this is something that Kang the Conqueror says about Immortus. And again, it sounds very fitting in this regard. He called himself the Master of Time. Gardener of Time is more truthful. He prunes away the chronal branches deemed by others to be dangerous, reducing reality to a bloodless meadow. Okay, so that's, again, a character that is kind of going for peace, making a kind of timeline that's more peaceful. It certainly feels like this variation of the character. I didn't finish the quote, though. This is, again, showing you that the guy that's coming, Kang, is much worse, he says. So he says reducing reality to a bloodless meadow, and the end of that quote is, but that's not the way of warriors, of men. I say, let it be a forest, let it be a jungle. Ooh. So, in doing this, they've released Kang the Conqueror, a violent warlord who is, and again, there's all sorts of other variants as well out there. Things could get very confusing very, very, very quickly, as if they weren't already. But Kang is a very dangerous character with full control of time. Again, this is why I think, it's not like he's going to be the villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is set up for something major. I talked about a multiversal war. We talked about Secret Wars possibly being set up. Certainly, it seems more likely than it ever could be now. Different variants of Avengers, potentially even evil Avengers, fighting each other. I think that could be like, an Avengers movie on the way to the next Avengers finale, in the way that we had, an Age of Ultron. You could have Avengers Secret War, and then the next one could be, Avengers taking on Kang once and for all. Yeah, this is again, it's too early to say how big of a setup this is, but it certainly feels like this could be setting up the future of the MCU going forward. I heard someone point out something interesting, which is that, we were all talking about how Wanda might have set up the multiverse in some ways. And obviously here we know it was Loki. Well, it was Sylvie technically, but it was Loki in some way. And Wanda, of course, at the end of WandaVision, she could all of a sudden kind of hear her kids screaming. That could potentially be an explanation explained by this. The fact that there was one timeline, and in that timeline she had no kids. In another timeline, she might have those kids. And because of that, now she can hear them because she's messing around with the multiverse. And now that the multiverse is officially into existence, she's able to say, okay, they exist in this timeline. So could that be a plot of Doctor Strange in the multiverse analysis, her going through different multiverses to try to get her kids, or something else? Who knows? The fact that the multiverse is now open, though, means that anything that has happened in the MCU in the past can now be totally rewritten and undone. There's I can't even go through the whole thing, but Jonathan Hickman, a comic writer, he wrote the Fantastic Four, then the Avengers. It was really heavily emphasis on time travel, but basically, this gives Marvel a license to bring in whatever the hell they want and make that the new normal. For example, in theory, they could say, we like that version of the Fantastic Four from the Fox universe. They'll never do that because there was no good version of the Fantastic Four in the Fox universe. But they might say, hey, we actually want to have, the Fan-4-stick version of the Fantastic Four in our MCU. We can take them now from the multiverse and put them in our timeline. And then when all this is done, if they wanted, they could say, okay, this is going to be the new timeline. Boom. It means that they could, in theory, take, Hugh Jackman and bring him into this timeline. While also, if they really wanted, have a young version of Wolverine. It means you could have unlimited versions of certain characters, different versions of characters, and that you could say, hey, let's have Miles Morales and Peter Parker going forward or maybe even make them the same age if you wanted. It means you could take a character at any point in the timeline and bring them into the main continuity. In the comics at one point, I know that they brought Tony Stark, who was, I think Iron Man had died. Tony Stark was in a different timeline. They took Tony Stark from that timeline and brought him into this timeline. And they're like, hey, we have Iron Man back. They could do that. I don't think they're going to do it anytime soon if they do. But the possibilities are now definitively endless. I don't know how crazy or weird they're going to get with it. But at the end of this, certainly, there's every possibility in the world on the table for any character they want to bring back from any different universe, of any different iteration, to make things where they want. Basically, they can now rearrange the chessboard whatever way they want. It's not the sort of thing... It's the sort of thing you can do very rushed if you want it. I'm not going to say that it's going to be rushed when they do it in Flashpoint, or the Flash movie, I guess, that DC are doing. But here, they can do whatever they want. They can bring characters back from the dead now, which has never stopped them before anyway. But they can bring any version of any character into it. You're talking a lot about something like Young Avengers. They could bring Kid Loki in. They could bring Alligator Loki. They could bring Classic Loki. All of those could come back. They could basically say, hey, that character that we teased in this version, but never fully realized. Well, turns out in this timeline they're fully realized. For example, the Incredible Hulk. They hinted at the leader. Okay, well, we're not going to bring back that version of the leader, but in this timeline, here's a fully furnished version of the leader. Here you go, boom. This is why my head exploded, because there's a million different possibilities here. As for what they do, it remains to be seen. But regardless, I guarantee you that as they do go through this phase, no matter if it's the next month, next few years, I don't want to say I'll be doing this in a decade. I don't know that for sure, I suppose. But keep it liked and subscribed here, because I'll be going through it as it happens. As for the next step in the TV universe, which is what this Watcher series is for, we don't have a lot yet. We have What If, which is animated. It starts August 11th, I think. I'm not going to be doing that weekly. It just doesn't feel as essential. I'd probably do a few episodes covering it at some point, maybe a part 1 or part 2 or something. But I don't think it's not going to have a major ramifications in the MCU. It's animated. It's sort of, it's What If. It's what it sounds like. But I am not done. Because, of course, there is 2 more shows coming by the end of the year, Hawkeye and Miss Marvel. I will be going through them, of course, but until then, the Watcher is going to return as the Rewatcher. We did Fantastic Four last time. What will we do this time? I can't say. It's too early to say just yet, but come back in August. If you don't want to miss it, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, because I will be coming back with the Rewatcher. Very excited to do that. Aside from that, whenever Miss Marvel starts, I'll be doing the Watcher again. I might even be able to fit in. I was going to say squeeze and fit, and I got squid. Ugh, disgusting. Squid. Sounds disgusting. But anyway, I might even be able to do another Rewatcher before Miss Marvel comes back. We don't have a date for that yet. Could be sometime soon. We figured that out. But of course, either way, I'll probably do a special on What If at some point. And thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Is there something I missed? What did you think of the finale of Loki? What do you think this means for the MCU as a whole? Take it to the comments and let me know. But you might want to take your comics and figure out what the hell is going on anyway. Jonathan Hickman's run will probably help you out there, as mentioned. Either way, thank you for checking this out. Please stick around, please come back, like and subscribe and all that good shit, because remember, I'll be watching. Take care.